So, welcome Teresa Dellbridge to Livsenergi-podden. How are you today?
I'm very good, thank you.
And I'm super happy to have you here. So, we have you here because of the book that you have written called The Power of Numerology. That is not the only book you have written.
Oh, by no means. I've written an awful lot. I think it's about 50.
50?
Yeah, a lot of them were quite short ones,
Yeah.
written in the 90s, covering a wide spectrum of sort of mystical subjects. And 12 of them were on the signs, each of the signs of the zodiac. So those books were about 25,000 words each. So they count to the total of 50. And then I've written books on the moon. I've written books on Wicca. I wrote the Fairy Bible as well, which has been a successful one. So yes, I've written a lot. I've been fortunate to be able to make my voice heard.
Yeah, certainly. So, am I right that you have a British accent?
Yes, yes. I'm actually half Irish and I have Irish nationality, but and I'm half Belgian actually. So I'm not actually English at all, but I am British.
Dellbridge sounds like a very British name.
Yes, that's my husband, and he is very English.
Okay, so where do you live nowadays?
In the Cotswolds, in England. That is the sort of southwest, but not the extreme southwest. It's beautiful, very hilly, quite green. Even now we've got the green coming back. It's been very parched, but there's been a bit of rain. The hills are lovely. They're magical little valleys. The stone is kind of honey-colored. It's a lovely part of England.
When just Googling Teresa Dellbridge, numerology is just, like you said, it's just one spiritual piece of a multi-spiritual Teresa. Tell us, what more do you know? What is the spiritual word to you?
My spirituality is central to my life, really, and kind of bringing the message of the goddess is how I would put it to people who are interested. The whole idea of goddess worship is radically different from the idea of Father God in the way we've been given him in the Judeo-Christian tradition. In the pagan faiths, there is a male deity, the god, but he isn't the kind of lawgiver. He's not the judgmental lawgiver. He's a protective presence. And the whole idea of goddess worship brings a very different flavor to spirituality. And I actually think it's essential to the feminist movement. I don't know where we're going with feminism. We seem to be wanting to be men instead of empowering ourselves in that ancient way, that goddess way, which is not necessarily about the linear consciousness, the logic that we prize these days. It's more about instincts and about totality and about inner wisdom and different rhythms. As women, we live and work with different rhythms, which I guess in tribal times, not that I wish to exalt tribal times, whatever they were, as being wonderful, because obviously there were many things that were not wonderful, but having that ability to be more in tune with instinct and with the rhythms we have as women, able to weave that into our productive working lives. We don't have that now, where, for instance, we are more about suppressing everything to do with periods, rather than thinking, when I have a period, I need quiet. And the kind of life that we now have to be part of, it does not foster that. I'm not saying there's an easy answer, but I just feel that there's something lost there. We need to bring the goddess back for women, for men, because they've suffered also through patriarchy. So that's one of the things that's kind of central to my attitude. And of course, that brings in a whole load of symbolic and instinctual material that actually knits together, because astrology is one of my main subjects, but numerology, of course, is part of astrology with the symbolism of numbers, and that comes into Wicca also. So, and into tarot, it's all there.
It's all intertwined. They're all intertwined in a big spiritual braid.
Yes, that's that's how I feel.
So how about numerology? Where did this come into your life and how?
Now, you're asking me how, and I cannot remember. I knew you were going to ask me that. I just know that from the age of 13, I was exploring it. And I was looking at the numerology of my name, which has since changed. And I was sort of weighing up. I mean, I'm interested in the symbolism of numbers and seeing how that was playing out in life, and why a 2 would be a certain way and a 3 would be a different way. It all made sense, and knitting together with the picture of life as being about vibrations. So it sort of connects with color, connects with astrology. It's all part of the network, and quite a nice, simple, satisfying part, because you can very quickly get to numbers that are indisputably in your life, like your birthday. You know, that number repeats. And with the name, there's a little bit more of a debate, because the system is essentially Hebrew, I understand. I'm sure it has come down to us through other ancient pathways also, but the thing with the Hebrew numbers is they're the same as letters, and that does not translate into our system, because our numbers don't, our letters are not numbers. So there's a little bit of question mark about the name. But then the thing is that when if you're doing a questionnaire, quite often you'll do first question, and then you'll have a succession of options, which will be A, B, C, D. So we do still think of the letters of the alphabet as being numbers also. So so it kind of works with names. And that's how we can get the vibration of our name.
Yeah, I believe it works good enough.
And I think also numerology, like a lot of spiritual disciplines, is also about being aware in life, because sometimes you will find a number comes up in your life a lot, and it's not necessarily anything to do with your name or your birthday. It can be just a number. It's like, why does that number keep coming up? And sometimes watching that is a little bit of a quest, because it's a vibration, and it might be, say it's a larger number like 55. Watching that to see where it surfaces and researching what that might mean in its different components. I mean, it's 2 5s, but 5 and 5 makes 10, which is a 1. And so you've got the real sort of crackerjack energy of the 5, the sort of changeable, dynamic, bit of a rebel energy you've got with 5. You've got 2 5s evolving into a 1, which is a very determined, independent number. Just a question, really. Sometimes it can just be a journey. It's about noticing numbers and car numbers. Sometimes people will find they end up with car numbers that seems to be the same number. Just about watching things like that and being interested.
You were interested in numerology already as a 13-year-old.
Yes, I remember reading about it when I was sunbathing in the garden.
How did your spiritual journey start? Because if you found numerology at 13, what did you find before that? And where were you born spiritually interested, perhaps?
Well, I think I was born spiritually interested, but I had a lot of it talked out of me, because I was brought up a Catholic, and I sensed things. And I was told that I was imagining it, not in a nasty way, But it did a lot of damage, because even now I'm very self-questioning, which some people might say is a good thing. But I mean, the house that my grandmother lived in was haunted by my grandfather. And I can just see him standing. I don't remember actually seeing him visually, but I knew he was there. And now when I think about it in my mind's eye, he was standing. I can see the expression on his face, and he was very, very sad. He couldn't move on to the spirit world because he died so abruptly. My grandmother was Belgian. She didn't even speak the language. He left her and 7 children. He was just kept to this earth plane by this sense of terrible sorrow, loss, and responsibility. And that was corroborated when they tried to sell the house by somebody who was a practicing psychic and medium. And she said exactly the things I'd been sensing. What I felt as a child was just being afraid to go upstairs in the dark because he was there. And nobody said, well, he's, because I know now he was reaching out to me. I was his little granddaughter, and he was reaching out. But that was the sort of thing that was talked out of me. What was not talked out of me was a kind of a devotion to Virgin Mary. And now I realize that was the mother goddess. And so I did novenas to her and was very aware of her presence. And of course, if you actually look at the evolution of the concept of Our Lady, she comes from Isis or Aset. Isis is the Greek name, and from very ancient Egyptian idea of a magical feminine power. Isis is the most complete goddess form that there is, and within the, I think the term is Neteru, the Egyptian gods, the Egyptian pantheon, she was very powerful. She tricked the sun god Ra out of his power. So that was how I was coming into goddess worship. And I just loved being out in nature. It made me feel complete. And I remember when I was learning literature, Wordsworth, the poet Wordsworth, who's a very well-known poet in England, they said he was a nature mystic, and I scoffed. I said, he's no more nature mystic than I am. And I didn't realize that I actually was a nature mystic. So it's all of that knitted together as I grew older. And then when I went to university, I became interested in reincarnation and Buddhism, and just had a very slight flirtation with Buddhist ideas and the idea of enlightenment.
Did you study spirituality in university, or how did you embrace your interest in?
Oh no, that was a sideline really. I used to go to a lot of spiritualist meetings and be part of seances, and we had sort of phenomena that took place in the flat because we were kind of evoking all of these presences, but things were fine because we had actually done our work with protection, although I would not say way to go and just to anybody that wants to experiment, because you do have to be careful. I was very fortunate that I was with somebody who actually knew what he was doing, but that was much more interesting than what I was studying, which was English actually.
But then again, you've had your fair share of English when writing the books.
Yeah. Yes, and then I did my MA in cultural cosmology, so that brought in the astrology, so it was quite very different kind of thing.
So have you always been working in this field, or have you tried to work in the more regular areas of life, or are you true spirit?
Tried and failed. And really I should have taken the knowledge from astrology, from numerology, the things I knew about myself that I kind of thought I had to put to one side, try and cope with a 9 to 5, which, well, just I wish I had really taken seriously, if you like, the things that I knew, when I started to become involved in astrology. I mean, I knew I was Pisces. I didn't actually train properly as an astrologer till I was I was in my 30s. Then I got the diploma of the Faculty of Astrological Studies, and that's another thing that I do, is draw up charts. But it was quite clear from my chart that I was not made for a 9 to 5. End of. And I just kind of thought there was something wrong with me, and I would get migraines all the time. Going into an office was like being in a prison. I absolutely hated it. I couldn't see the point of it. And, you know, I just didn't do well at all. And then I had a sort of flirtation with sales jobs, but I couldn't really see the point of those either. And then I had when I had my first 2 children, I had quite a lot of time where I did not work full time. I was just doing little part-time things here and there and getting more training. And then when my first 2 children were old enough, then I started work as a counselor, which was much better, because even though it's really demanding, it was my schedule. It was varied, and that's what I needed. And so from then on, my career just sort of built, really, and I started writing books, and the rest you know.
Yeah. However, when it comes to numerology, what's so interesting and fascinating about it, I think, is that you can actually use it in everyday life to get answers, or at least some kind of guidance to in what direction you should go, or so how has numerology helped you in life? Do you have any specific examples?
Well, from my point of view, the number 1 comes up in my birth date, both with my actual birthday and my full birth date.
Yeah.
And that was something I didn't really want to embrace in a way, because it sounds so solitary, and it sounds so not community orientated. It's a sort of, it's not exactly a leader number. I mean, a person who has a strong 1 part to them needs to find their own way. Now, they can be quite happy if other people follow them, but they don't necessarily want to boss. Or when I say boss, I don't mean boss in an unpleasant way, but a 1 will not necessarily want to embrace the role of leader, although they may want to embrace the role of pioneer. But it's more the function of sort of perhaps an 8 to want to organize others. But I mean, we've all got several numbers in our personality here, then, just as we do in our astrological chart. But 1 is a very important number to me, and it just took. I wish I'd embraced that earlier. I wish I'd not been telling myself, well, that's not very feminine, which I did, because I grew up in the era where that was bandied around a bit for females. And I wish I'd just sort of listened to the fact that I needed to walk to a different drum. I needed to walk to my own drum. I needed to have the courage to be me, and to be independent, and to live by my own rules. But I've also got in my name, I should have got all of this to hand, really, but I haven't. But I have sort of a...
But we can do them. We can make them.
We can do. Well, I should have a note. I've changed my name several times, so I don't really follow that so much. But Teresa Dellbridge works out as a 2. And that's very different. That's somebody who needs a soulmate, somebody who needs support, somebody who needs somebody to walk alongside of them. And actually that is important to me. I do need that as well. And that's a real challenge, because being those 2 things is not easy. And that's something that I think can be really helpful to people when they can actually see, because things like numerology and astrology give you a language for the conflict that may be within you, or what you may perceive as conflict, which actually is contrast. And then when you see it actually down like that, you think, well, yes, I am like that, but I'm also like that in different situations. And that's okay. We don't have to be just one thing. And I think that's something that we're perhaps indoctrinated with, is you have to be one way, you have to make a choice. And You mustn't change your mind. Or at least you can change your mind, but it's not a virtue, really.
But if those two things are important to you or to me, and they're contradictory, how do I interpret the contradiction there?
I don't think anything is totally contradictory.
No.
You know, I think we have different areas of life where we might put different characteristics into play. And so I think in my case with the number one, the sort of where I'm finding my own trajectory through life, that is a very one kind of thing. But I do also have parts of my life where I am very much a two. I really like and need to be in a partnership. I like and need to have a friend to confide in. That's important, and that's okay. And it doesn't matter if I'm different. That's what I think it's about, being comfortable with being different sometimes. Sometimes I can be really dependent and pathetic. Not pathetic, that's a pejorative word, but quite needy. And needing, not wanting to be alone. And other times quite the opposite. And I think everybody's like that. And we're not always the same in every situation.
No, definitely not. And just because we have put some kind of, label on this number two is not what you want it to be. Maybe you don't think it's a positive thing or so on. If we can just change that label and see it for what it is, rather than put a value to it.
Yes, it is about not being judgmental.
Yeah.
But of course, it's also about the way the numbers in your makeup harmonize anyway, because obviously one is very different from two, whereas 6 is not. So Teresa, which is a more intimate manifestation of me, works out as 6.
Yeah. So the first name. So when you talk about the number 1 and number 2, I have actually written down my numbers. So because we have different numbers, and which one are you talking about now? Personal number?
So you have your personality number, which is derived from the day and the month, from the day of the month that your birthday falls on. So in the book, that's termed the personality number.
Exactly.
And that never changes.
Exactly. And then the other number that's grown from your name, that can change if you change.
Yeah, but there's the other number from your birth is called your life path number, which is the total of the digits in your birth date.
Yeah.
And that doesn't change. Another important number is the soul number, which is arrived at by adding the value of the vowels.
Yeah, exactly. And then you have the consonant as well.
The consonants, yes, but I don't make so much of those in the book. They seem to be more, the tradition seems to be that's more of a hidden part of you. The consonants are what? We don't hear those as much. The more the out-breath of the vowel seems to be more important, but it's still there. That's why we're all so complex. And then the destiny number is found by using all the letters in your name as it appears on your birth certificate.
Exactly. Yeah, so it's very clear in the book what number is for what cause and how you should use it. And then you can also see if you have the singular numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and up to 9, and what each of this number means.
Yes, they each have a different. They each have a different meaning, and if you actually go deeply into it, it's like astrology. You know that when you look at the whole astrological chart, there's a hell of a lot in there. Yeah. And quite often there be completely different characteristics. that
Yeah.
are within the same person. And that's exactly how we are, isn't it? That's just exactly how we are. And it's the same with numerology when you go really deeply into it.
If I add up if I add up the numbers in my first name, Alexandra, I get an 8.
Right. So 8. Now, to the Chinese, 8 is considered to be a very lucky number. In numerology, it's funny, I was talking about that to a friend of mine this morning. She also is an 8. And when you're writing a book, you want to make things vivid. You want to give examples of colorful examples of how it's going to manifest in life. So one of the ways I sort of illustrate an 8 is somebody who's got a sort of, is quite a leader number, got a sort of corporate awareness and the ability to wield power, really. And now that sounds, it sounds like you've got to be the CEO of some multinational company in order to express that. But my friend who's an 8, she had a hairdressing business. She is not high powered or somebody who would be like, what's that film? I don't know if you've got it in Sweden. The Devil Wears Prada, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yes.
She's not like that at all, but she knows what she's doing. She can organize things. She can organize her knowledge. She can organize her skill. She can make it pay in the nicest possible way. She has that overall sense of practicality and the value of money, not mercenary. She just knows what she's doing. And that's the kind of thing that an 8 has. You've got the practicality of 4 kind of doubled and widened out a bit. 4 is a very practical sort of hands-on vibration, whereas the 8 applies that more broadly and more conceptually. So, but it's an achieving kind of number.
I like number 8.
Number 8's good.
No, but I can, what you're saying, I can totally relate. And the funny thing is, I don't know why I have that, but I guess a lot of people have a favorite number, a favorite figure. So, and my favorite figure is 4, has always been. I don't know why.
Well, it's balanced, isn't it?
4
elements, the 4 directions of the compass. And when you create a magic circle, you have the 4 watchtowers, which are the elements and the directions combined. It's a sort of protective, grounding, solid.
And when you said that 8 is 4 doubled, you kind of magnify.
Yes, kind of. It's sort of 4 taken to I mean, 4 in itself is very complete and very useful and very, it's a lovely number. So I'm not saying one is better than the other, but with 8, you've got the broader remit. You've got the grounding in the physical, but you've also you've got a block built on top of that, which is in concepts and constructing things, having that vision of the future. And when you put 8 on its side, it's infinity.
Yeah.
Which is also,
I like that too.
Which takes you a long way.
So is there anything a number 8 should look out for?
Well, I mean, clearly, because you're interviewing me today, you've got that measure of professional success. You've found your niche. I think it is important for most 8s to find their way, to make their mark in the world, and for that to be something that's not too theoretical. It's got to be something that actually is constructive. So you need a challenge. You need things to build. You need a vision going forward, but not something that's airy-fairy, something you can actually do and grasp. You need a good amount of power over your environment. By that, I mean power to, not power over. But 8s do usually make pretty good leaders of people.
So when we're talking now, it feels like you're reading me rather than just talking numerology, because everything you say is 100% me.
Well, that's really good. That's the power of numerology in action. And I don't know if you always were aware of your need to express yourself as an 8.
Yeah.
But
Not at all. And I've been kind of struggling with the feeling of needing something to build, because I am building something now, but I wasn't always. And I realized that I need, my biggest drive in life is to see things grow.
yeah,
If it's me, if it's my inner self, my own person, if it's my children, seeing them grow into human beings, smart human beings, or if it's a business. The only thing I'm not really super keen on seeing growing is plants. You know, when you, yeah, how do you say, when you tend to the garden? That's my husband's area. I'm much more into business and people.
yeah. I think gardening is that's a different kind of thing, because that's something that you put in the earth and it grows by itself. Well, not completely by itself, but
As in water.
with reasonable amount of sunshine and rain, and not doing anything dreadful, it probably will grow. But you're talking really about things that you're investing a lot of yourself in.
Yes, true.
And it's something that you're building. You want it to grow, but you are actually putting in that energy that makes it grow.
Yeah.
Which is rather
and when you say this now, I feel, because sometimes I feel stagnant, and I feel that I'm not moving in the right direction. And when hearing you, I figure I need to listen to that, because then I'm not in my best position.
No, you're not in your best position if you're stagnant.
No.
You're not the kind of person that can just sort of watch the flowers grow.
No.
You need to have a challenge. So I think probably the trick is to have enough challenge so that you feel stimulated, but not so much that you can feel overwhelmed or overburdened. I mean, 8s can take on too much. I mean, well, several of us can take on too much, but 1s can take on too much as well. But yes, 8s can, because 8s are usually good at getting results. They can be the go-to for other people as well. And then being so capable often means that it's hard to delegate, and you have a lot of irons in the fire. And when that happens, you don't necessarily know you don't necessarily know when you're on the brink of taking on too much until you've just taken on that little bit too much, and then you think, oh my goodness, there's a weight on me, or I'm overcommitted. I mean, do you find that you do overcommit yourself?
Oh, certainly. But I have some kind of break, that like inner break, that tells me to take it easy.
Well, that's good. I mean, and that's, as an 8, it's a kind of, it does have a balance to it, and you probably will recognize quicker than, say, somebody who's very number 1-ish, who would sort of go forging on and then think, oh heavens, what's happened? I've done all of this and I've got all of this and I didn't think it through. Whereas as an 8, you're more likely to think things through. It's a more considered. That's why 8 is a successful number, because there's that propensity to think things through.
So we've talked a little bit about number 1, number 2. Did we speak about number 2 a little bit?
Yeah.
You and number 8. Can we just run through shortly the other ones? So number 3, for example.
Number 3, that's probably, if you've got a lot of 3 in your makeup, you're probably going to be fairly easygoing. It's a very creative number. And it's a very playful number. But it's also a number where you can just think, oh, isn't life lovely, and actually not do a lot. Which I guess is absolutely fine. But even though you're enjoying just being, there can end up being a slight sense of discontent and procrastination, as we can all get. But because 3 is essentially easygoing, they might not achieve an awful lot, which is a shame, because there can be a hell of a lot of creativity there and artistic talent and a lot of joyfulness and spontaneity and the ability to channel the inner child and probably to be quite good with children. So that's a 3. 4 is a very practical number. 4s have to be careful that they don't get bogged down in the mundane and the material. They can get a little bit worried if they're not secure. They like everything to be fairly predictable. They're extremely reliable. It's a very reliable number. It's the sort of person who would have a practical solution for things. Somebody who really knows their way around what we call the ordinary world, who's very grounded. Somebody who might actually really enjoy being earthy, maybe doing gardening, although gardening can appeal to a lot of numbers. Well, maybe actually doing something practical or doing something with money, protecting something. Very grounded. 5, by contrast, is lively, an innovator, a restless energy, inventive, somebody who doesn't follow the common herd, likes to be a rule breaker, maybe. 5. So whereas a number 1 will ignore the rules, number 5 will break them. All these nuances, really, that sometimes that are not so obvious, but somebody who perhaps is quite looks on the bright side, and they just trusts to luck and thinks everything's going to to work out fine. Very active, probably quite expressive person, a bit unpredictable, sort of trickster type energy, if you know what I mean.
Yes.
6, by contrast, is very community orientated and loves beauty, balance, loves to create a pleasant atmosphere, welcoming, nurturing. You can imagine that the typical 6 is the hostess with the mostest kind of thing, creating a lovely atmosphere in the home, spreading love. The negative to that is that this person might not be able to cope with disharmony very well. And you could find that a little bit with 2s, that they can actually be quite judgmental because they're trying to balance things and sort of looking perhaps for a balance that they can sort of get a bit anxious, worrying about balancing and seeing the 2 sides, whereas the mission perhaps is more to think, well, there are 2 sides and that's that. But sometimes the 2 and 6 and a little bit 4, not so comfortable with dichotomy and wanting things to be part of a pattern, a bit more predictable, so that there's harmony there. 6 is a kind of beautiful people, might be interested in beauty therapy, but that's the illustration and the stereotype. You know, you're not going to find 6s necessarily in beauty therapy, but there's that impulse there to create that on some level. 7 is considered to be a mystical number, but they can also be quite forensic, not necessarily going to be airy-fairy, although they might be, but if they can be quite enigmatic, a little bit secretive, very interested in mysteries, very interested in getting to the bottom of mysteries, maybe sort of slightly interested in debunking mysteries, but then we'll go off and find another mystery. So there's a mysterious air about 7s, and that penetrating looking below the surface. 8 we've done.
Yeah.
9 is the number of idealism. So we've got to the end of the cycle. So after 9, we come back to 1, don't we? So there can be a slight world weariness, a lot of idealism, in the sense of wanting to follow humanitarian causes. And while you'll find that with 6 and with 2 as well, they're very interested in community, 9 tends to take that to a higher level. And they want to see the deeper meaning or further meaning in everything. Or there, did I say there can be a kind of slightly world weary thing about 9s, where they've sort of seen it all, done it all, would like it all to be a lot better. We can still work towards making the world a better place, but sometimes needing quiet as well by themselves, simply because of the breadth of vision that they have to deal with. So that's all the way through the numbers.
So 1 through 9, and just sometimes you say if you have a lot of 3s in your setup, so how should we look at numbers? So I mean, we can calculate this number by looking at our first name, looking at our full name, and so on. So when you're talking about that particular thing, if you have a number of the same number, how can we relate to that? How should we look at that?
Well, you do have these different sides to you, and there's no. We tend to live in a culture where we want everything to go to a neat pattern. We want to be able to put people in a niche. We want to that's a kind of mindset that that I think we just have. And the truth of the matter is that we have many different sides to us. But you may find a number repeats, like for me, the number 1 repeats. Yeah. And that's a really important number for me.
So how does it repeat? Where does it repeat?
It repeats in my birth, but in my, let me look at the actual terms that we've used. So my personality number and my life path number are both a 1.
Ah, yeah.
And so that 1 will be very strong in me. But there's other numbers as well. And, however deep you want to go, you may find just about every number manifests at a certain level in your life. But if you've got a lot of 3, if you've got destiny number, life path number, and maybe a soul number of 3, then 3 is going to be really powerful in you. And but maybe not. Maybe you've only got 3 in one respect, and then you've got a 1 and a 5 and a 6, and it's going to be of real interest to see how these different numbers are being expressed. And of course you can change your name, and that's what a lot of people do. They decide they want a certain number, and they will change their name to fall in with that.
Yeah.
Which I always think is,
they're manipulating numerology.
Kind of.
Yeah.
I think you can, if you manipulate it too much. Also, it's quite difficult when people know you by a certain name. It's quite hard to get them to change that. I have a friend who's changed her name, and it just doesn't feel quite right.
No.
And authors, some will have a pen name, and some will choose, occasionally people who are into numerology will choose a name that they think is going to bring them success.
Oh, yeah.
Which may or may not be the case, because although you have a number like 8, which purports to be successful, but if that's not really in harmony with you somehow, then maybe that's not going to work. Or if let's say you want to be a romantic novelist, maybe you'd be better off having a 6.
Yeah.
But then you're a little bit restricted by that. Maybe that's not all of you. Maybe you're not really going to fit that. So I kind of think go with the flow, really. I wouldn't go through life looking for numbers everywhere all the time. I actually think that if you're not careful, you can be so concerned with interpreting life that you don't live it.
No, exactly. You forget to live.
Yeah, you can frighten, and also people frighten themselves.
Yeah.
And they certainly frighten themselves with astrology. I mean, the number of times people have said, oh, the planets are lining up and it's really something awful. And I'm thinking, no, but they always do that. They would do that every few years. It doesn't mean what you think it means. And numbers are the same. It's very easy to catastrophize. And sometimes now I'm not going to be able to quote what this number is, but there were numbers that were repeating in the assassination of Lincoln and the assassination of President Kennedy.
Oh.
And I can't remember what the numbers were, but I remember thinking, yes, they repeat, and that's interesting. But that is not really, but how do you interpret that? It was just quite difficult to think what you going to draw from it. You know, could you say that sequence of numbers is dangerous? No, you couldn't really. But it was what it was telling me as an esotericist, if you like, is that there is a strange pattern in life that we don't always understand, but somehow the energies were similar in these two circumstances. That's what I draw from it, rather than actually thinking, that means that number is sinister, because that pattern of numbers came up there and it's come up here. And I think we can go too far with that. Yeah,
because if we do search around for it, we would probably find the same sequence of numbers in more positive.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. So it's about noting a patterning often. Yeah. And yes, there are things we can use, and some of the simple, I like to keep things quite simple. And you know, your birth date and your name, they're quite simple. Yep. Those walk with you through life. They're going to have an effect on you. Now, they're going to be all sorts of things that also have an effect on you, but you could drive yourself slightly doolally trying to interpret everything here, there, and everywhere. Do you see what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah. And I really agree with you as well. I see everything in the spiritual sphere as something positive that should add positive guidance, and not something to live by as a rule. I'm not living my whole life after the guidance. I'm just picking the best pieces.
I think that's a good way to go. But also, when you use the word guidance, quite advisedly, it's, you know, you're looking for guidance, not being told what to do. Looking for some wisdom.
Wisdom is the exactly the right word, because you can interpret wisdom, and if it's something, like you said, it's not, you're not listening to someone telling you what to do. No, I'm not, because what if what you say, for example, doesn't really resonate with me? I have to interpret it my way, and maybe it doesn't fall down immediately. It might take a few days for me to ground what I heard from you, for example.
Well, yes, and also things work on different levels. Yeah. And what was I going to say? Yes, so whenever we turn to what might broadly be called a system of divination, whether it's numerology, which is something that's quite in a way static, because you're working with the name or the birthday that you've got, or whether you're working with something like tarot, where either you or somebody else does a spread for you, which is a thing of the moment. But whatever you're doing, people, again, it's the sort of consciousness we're brought up with. The narrative that we've got is, it's got to be exact, it's got to be logical, it's got to be clear, and it's got to give instructions and so on. And it's got to be objective. And I think objectivity, although it's very useful and in certain things, it's largely an illusion, because what we're bringing into life is ourselves. So whenever we go to anybody for any form of divination, with you asking me about numerology, or if you went to somebody for a tarot reading, you are bringing yourself. So the act of you actually looking at that, you are part of the picture. You're going to draw from that what you need. And it's like when people, I do the astrology column now for a magazine called Spirit and Destiny, which will be coming out, my work will be coming out in the new year. And, you know, sun sign astrology, people say, oh, well, it's just, you know, it's nonsense because there's only 12 signs and some people are going to have different experiences. Well, yes, that's slightly missing the point, because quite often you will kind of think, oh, I wonder what's going to happen, just need a little bit. And you'll dip into that and you'll draw from it something that will make you think, oh, yes. Sometimes you won't, but a lot of time you will. And maybe the whole thing literally isn't for you, but you will draw something from that that helps you and makes you feel supported, or just gives you that little bit of insight. Or one person who, say, a Pisces will read it one way, and another person who's a Pisces will read it another. Then you draw something for yourself, and your own intuition is kind of reaching out and being enriched. In my personal life, I tend to find days that have the date 4, like the 4th of April, not the whole date, but just the 4. I tend to find those are quite often more difficult for me than other days. But I haven't taken that's just been going through certain times in my life where they've been very emotional. I've not been in such a good place in my heart, that 4 days are more challenging. I could say unlucky or unfortunate. But I don't go through life looking for that. I mean, there's going to be whole times in my life where I don't even notice. But I have noticed that. But I don't look at a 4-day coming up and think, oh gosh, 4th of September, which is in what? Where are we? Oh, that was yesterday.
Yeah, it was yesterday. So how was yesterday?
Actually, yesterday was not, it didn't go as well as I thought. And I had a visit with a friend that was quite a little bit sad, not for me personally, but that it did. So yes, it was not my best kind of day. It certainly wasn't as good a day as Saturday, which was a 3-day. But so that's a little theme in my life, has been that a 4 date, which would also include perhaps the 13th. In fact, I remember a 13th where something
so 1 + 3,
or the 22nd, which I've not observed so much. There's a little theme in my life running there of a 4-day. So that's what I've noticed. Now, what would I do with that? Well, if I
wouldn't go around being afraid of the next number 4 day.
Exactly, that's what I do not want to do. So I've just kind of noticed it. And then some days, sometimes if that's happened and I think, well, that happened, I think, well, yes, it was a 4-day and that's all right. That was that. You got through that, you managed, and you're moving on. So so the danger in that kind of thing is that, like I said, that we become controlled by it or frightened by it. And if we go into it too much, we're going to find things that seem to be good, and we're going to find things that seem to be bad, and we're going to focus on it and amplify it. And I don't think that really is terribly helpful.
No, not necessarily. So, but why do you think a lot of people would say, oh, this happened at 11 past 11? So it's 4 number ones in a row when it's 11 past 11 in the morning. So what does that number tell you? It's 4 ones, and it's 1 1 1 1. So it would be also 4, right? 1 + 1 + 1 + 1 4.
Yeah. Well, again, if it's a running theme in your life, then it means something for you. I mean, I would, as a numerologist, I would look at the 2 11s, which are master numbers. I would, you know, are you sort of linking that to something that's some news that you've heard that is quite important in regard to a community, a wide scope of people? Or what are you relating that to? Is that something that's happened in your life that's deeply philosophically meaningful to you at 11 minutes past 11? Or is it just a patterning that you don't know the meaning of, really? Or is it a patterning at all if you just noticed it's 11 minutes past 11? I don't know. It would.
What is the master number 11? What does it say?
11 is the upper vibration of 2, which a lot of some numerologists make a lot of that. But actually, whenever you reduce a number to 2, you've got 2 ways of getting to it. It's going to be a 2 and a 0, or it's going to be a 1 and a 1. So a lot of times when you've got 2, you're going to have had an 11. So most times where you've got a 2 in your numerological makeup, it will have been an 11 on the way there. Yeah, that makes sense. Do you see what I mean?
Yes.
So it's kind of like a different level that you can respond to as a 2, which lifts it out of the personal. So where a 2 is about relating to another person or relating to things that are fairly similar, an 11 is a relationship with the collective more. So somebody who is very strongly 11 in their makeup is going to be interested in the community and wanting there to be harmony in the community, and strongly motivated to have community projects in progress, to have a sense of caring and charity, and a sense of responsibility for other people, and quite often will want to create perhaps charitable and community causes. So it comes away from the personal into the collective more. And it's called the Messiah number as well sometimes. So somebody who's got a strong 11 may want to be sort of out there acting as a bit of a savior. Maybe working in a food bank or organizing food banks or something like that.
Nice. Well, the world of numbers is extensive, and we can play around with it quite a lot if we want to, and we can also keep the personal numbers close and learn from them. That's what I take from this quick school of numerology.
Yes, definitely work with your personal numbers. Really think what they mean for you. But maybe it's an exercise in self-acceptance as well. And you could do the thing of changing your name so you invoke a certain number. By all means, play with that.
Yeah, good.
Well, thank you so much for your interest. Thank
you, Teresa. Have a good day now.
And you.
And see you again.
See you soon.
Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye-bye.